Good morning. My name is Rich Moglia-Cannon, and I'm your service leader today. Welcome to the UU Church of East Aurora. This is a special place, the epitome of religious freedom and inclusion. You are welcome here regardless of your religious beliefs, skin color, sexual orientation, or disability. We are united by our values, the values of justice, equity, peace, liberty, democracy, the environment, spiritual growth, the search for truth and meaning, and the inherent worth of every person. You are welcome here. Thank you for joining us on this holiday weekend. I have a couple of announcements. This morning, I'm joined by Jeremy Janzik, who is doing our AV today, and Dr. Madeline Harts on the piano, and Lauren Mallow with a presentation on ableism. We've got a very proud Grammy out back there cheering her on today. Because of the ongoing threat of COVID-19, we ask you that you remain seated, masked, and socially distanced. And when the music starts, do your best not to sing. You can hum, but you can't sing. We have also temporarily discontinued our coffee hour. We apologize for these inconveniences, which are designed to keep us all safe. Any other announcements? Please come forward. Speak into the mic, please.
I have an announcement about a class that is starting in January. If you're new to UU or if you're old to UU and you want to start fresh, Peter House is going to be doing a weekly class on Zoom for 4 consecutive weeks on kind of the history of UUism and where congregations fit into that idea today. So it'll start the week of January 9th and it'll go for 4 consecutive weeks. We are trying to pick the day, either Sunday after church or Tuesday or Wednesday evening. So if you can shoot me an email or see me after church and let me know if you're interested, what day might work best. I'll be making announcements all through December, but that's it. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Now we enter into the joyous spirit of our service as we listen to Dr. Madeline Harts play Thanksgiving by George Winston. Thank you, Madeline. Please recite with me the chalice lighting words which appear in your order of service. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. This sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. The opening words this morning are by Jennifer Von Roo and Lynette Lowe. Welcome to this space, this sanctuary of peace, where we come to not only create our best selves, but to do also the work of creating a beloved community. We come together today as individuals, much like individual pieces of glass or pottery that are different shapes, sizes, and colors, all of which are broken. I'll say that again, all of which are broken, with imperfect, jagged edges, but always beautiful. While our pieces may not always fit neatly together, it is within this sanctuary, guided by our principles, that we gather together to create a beautiful mosaic. May the brokenness and beauty you find in one another create peace in this space and fill our hearts with love. Now we have a story to talk about. It's for the young and the young at heart, and it's called The Rabbit Listened. Are you ready, Leona? All right. So the rabbit listened. So our main character is Taylor, who's a little boy with curly hair. See Taylor? One day, Taylor decided to build something new, something special, something amazing. Taylor was so proud. But then, out of nowhere, what? Birds knocked it down. Oh, things came crashing down. Oh, Taylor was just crushed. Look at Taylor's just crushed. The chicken was the first to notice. Cluck, cluck, what a shame. I'm so sorry this happened. Let's talk about it. Cluck, cluck. But Taylor didn't feel like talking, so the chicken left. Next came the bear. How horrible. I bet you feel so angry. Let's shout about it. Grrr. But Taylor didn't feel like shouting, so the bear left. The elephant knew just what to do.
Trump-da-dum, I can fix this. We just need to remember exactly the way things were.
But Taylor didn't feel like remembering, so the elephant also left. One by one, the animals came. The hyena, hee, let's laugh about it. The ostrich, gulp, let's hide and pretend nothing happened. The kangaroo, tisk, tisk, mate, what a mess. Let's throw it all away. The most terrible Australian accent. And the snake, shh, let's go down. Let's knock down someone else's. But Taylor didn't feel like doing anything with anybody. So eventually they all left until Taylor was alone. In the quiet, Taylor didn't even notice the rabbit, but it moved closer and closer until Taylor could feel its warm body. Together they sat in silence until Taylor said, "Please stay with me." The rabbit listened. The rabbit listened as Taylor talked. The rabbit listened as Taylor shouted. The rabbit listened as Taylor remembered and laughed. The rabbit listened to Taylor's plans to hide, to throw everything away, to ruin things for someone else. Through it all, the rabbit never left. And when the time was right, the rabbit listened to Taylor's plan to build again. I can't wait, Taylor said. It's going to be amazing. All that this congregation is and all that it accomplishes is because of the gifts that all of you bring. You bring your time, your talent, and your treasure. We are not going to pass a plate today for COVID safety reasons. Instead, we have left the plate on the bookshelf near the door. Feel free to leave something there now or on your way out. The Zoom participants can use you over there. You can use the donate button in the upper right-hand corner of the UU homepage. Please know we are grateful. This is the time in our service when we strengthen our circle of connection by sharing the meaningful events of our lives. You are now invited to come forward and share a joy or a concern.
So it's hard for me not to share this joy that is sitting right in front of me right now. Our first granddaughter, Leona Ann Mallow, is here, and I'm really joyful about that. I'd also like to light a candle for my cousins. They have 22-year-old twins. One is physically and neurologically typical. Her name is Ashley, and her brother, Andrew, has been a resident in a group home since he was 19. Friday, he had a stroke and he choked, and today is his funeral. So for his parents, Jody and Scott, and his sister Ashley, and for Andrew.
Anyone else? I will light one final candle for all of the unspoken joys and concerns, and we will acknowledge all of them with a period of quiet reflection. We are so lucky to have Lauren Mallow with us today. Lauren has her master's degree in speech language pathology from SUNY Geneseo. She has been working with preschool-aged autistic children at the Buffalo Hearing and Speech Center since 2011. Lauren is certified as an expert training leader in DIR floor time by the Interdisciplinary Council on Development and Learning. She now teaches and mentors fellow professionals and parents in DIR floor time. And she's going to introduce us to ableism today. And during her presentation, questions may arise in your head because my head exploded when she first started sharing this information with me several years ago. So if you have questions, just hold them to the end of the presentation and we'll take your questions at that point, including those of you online. So without further ado, let me bring up Lauren, get us going here.
Hello. Let me just get my PowerPoint up and running. Okay. Thank you for that introduction. I, like my dad said, I am Lauren Mallow, and I am certified in DIR floor time, and I will talk a little bit about what that means before I get going, just so everyone kind of understands my background. And before I start, I just want to say that this journey of self-reflection is, there's no judgment in it, and I want everyone to know that this is a safe space, and my goal is to get you thinking and start a lens shift and just start questioning those things that arise inside yourself. And I'm going to share my journey. Little snippet of what is DIR floor time. Well, first, the ICDL, which is the where I am certified through, was started by Stanley Greenspan 30 years ago, and it's the home of DIR and DIR floor time. This is used to promote positive development in all children and to help all individuals from children to adults with a wide range of emotional, sensory, regulatory, motor, learning, and developmental challenges or differences. And it is also, DIR floor time is now also being recognized as an evidence-based intervention for autism. And so what is it? So the D in DIR stands for development. So meeting the child or the individual or the adult where they are and knowing where they are and where they are headed. So the development kind of is our guide. The I is individual differences. So what makes each person unique? And everybody has individual differences. Some of our individual differences need more support than others. But we all have them because we all have a unique brain, every one of us. And R, which is probably the glue that holds everything together, is the relationship. And the theory behind DIR, which really sets it apart from other education interventions, is that all learning takes place within relationships. And so if you don't feel a connection with the person you're learning from, there's not really you may be able to memorize things, but you won't have that deep sense of intrinsic learning. And then floor time is the specific technique that includes, maybe getting down on the floor with the child, but if that's where they want to go, or sometimes, up the wall with some of the children. But so following their lead and their intrinsic interest and their passions, and also simultaneously doing this dance and finding that just right challenge to support their growth for further mastery of their social, emotional, or intellectual capacities. And if you want to learn more about what ICDL is, or what DIR is, or floor time, the website is icdl.com. And there's a ton of information on there. And if you notice on all my slides, I have an image description. So this is one step that we can take to be more inclusive, because some people have visual constrictions or also have visual integration constrictions. So they may have trouble seeing, the foreground from the background. And as if you go on this ableism journey, like I have, and I've dived deep, I've noticed that especially, social media pages that are focused on adults with autism, they always have an image description, because a lot of autistic people struggle with images. So the image description is a woman laying on her side on the floor at eye level with a sitting toddler who is touching her face. They are looking at each other and appear to be very connected, and there's toys scattered around them. So some terms that I might use in this presentation, just so everybody's on the same page. One of the terms is neurodiversity. So what this is a range of differences in individual brain functions. So differences are normal, and they're not deficits that need curing. So we are all neurodiverse. And then some other terms, neurodivergent versus neurotypical, are terms that have kind of emerged to describe individuals with less typical cognitive variations versus individuals with a more typical development. But I just watched a talk by Barry Prezant, who developed the CERTS model, which is very similar to DIR floor time. And he said, I challenged the term neurotypical because all of our neurology is so different. So is there really such thing as neurotypical? The term actually autistic is a title used mostly in the social media by the autism community. So they're kind of in response to their voices being drowned out by non-autistic people speaking for them. So they coined this term actually autistic, like, listen to me, I'm actually autistic. And then there are two ways to describe people, and one is person first language. So that is putting the person, and this is how I was always taught in grad school, so this has been a big lens shift for me, but putting the person first, so saying a person with autism, or a person with hearing loss, or a person with a disability. And then identity first language is using the disability is part of the person's identity. So it's part of their title. So an autistic person, or a what they prefer. During this presentation, I'm going to use identity first language just because that is what the majority of actually autistic people prefer. But like I said, everyone is different. So this is an image that I found from Pebble Art, who and her website is pebbleart.wordpress.com. She is actually autistic, and she so this image kind of illustrates what I was just saying, and this is how a lot of people feel, that saying I'm a person with autism is the same as saying I'm a person with gay, or I'm a person with blind, or I'm a person with Norwegian. It's kind of this notion that it's not part of me, but no, you would say I'm a blind person, or I'm a gay person, or I'm a Norwegian person, because it is part of your identity. It's part of who you are. And that's how a lot of autistic people feel about their diagnosis. So what is ableism? So the definition, is discrimination, a very general definition is discrimination in favor of able-bodied humans. When I was researching for this presentation, I found a definition that I loved even more than that, and that is, it is a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, intelligence, excellence, and productivity. And that was from Talia A. Lewis, who has a really great blog that I discovered through this process. And so some more obvious examples of ableism would be, no ramp to enter a building, no working elevator, not allowing students to use their augmentative communication devices. So that's what AAC stands for. So, some people need devices to speak because they don't have access to their mouth words. So having them not available for them, or obviously hate crimes or abuse against disabled people, or making assumptions. I know I saw a woman speak before who had cerebral palsy and said, everyone assumes things about my cognitive abilities based on my body, but that, those assumptions aren't true. But some may not be quite as obvious. And that is kind of what I wanted to bring our attention to today is, and these are just some examples, and I'm going to dive more into this, but saying something like, wow, you're autistic, you don't look autistic, or wow, you became a doctor in spite of having cerebral palsy. Wow, that's so inspiring. Or a term that I will go into more that we hear in classrooms all over our country is quiet hands, quiet hands. And we'll go into more why these are also ableist. Okay, so this is an example to get everyone thinking. This is maybe very well intended, but can equally be harmful and hurtful to the autistic community. So I'm going to read this out loud, and I want to hear everyone's thoughts. So this was a Facebook post that I don't have the person's name or anything, but this was someone posted this and it went viral. So it was shared a lot through social media. And it came with a picture. So this is me and Dan. Dan is a student nurse, and one day I hope he'll make a great nurse. Here's why. Dan is autistic, and as I've told him, his autism is not his disability, it is his superpower. His mental math is great, so he'll never get your meds wrong. He'll never forget things on his to-do list, as his memory is ridiculous. He's always happy, and the world needs more happy nurses. Sure, he may need some help sometimes, but who doesn't? Please like or share this to raise awareness and to inspire other people with autism to believe in your dreams and never let anyone tell you that you can't achieve them. Also, I think Dan's head will literally explode if this went viral. So what is everyone's impression of that? Does it feel supportive? What do you think the goal of the original poster was? And how does it make you feel? And remember, it's a safe space. So, anyone have any? Yeah. Right. So what she said was that it sounds like it was meant to be supportive, but it keeps kind of going back to he has great math skills and he's autistic and he's happy, but he's autistic, and it's kind of keeping him in that box. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts? Yes. Sounds like it's more about who's posting this versus about Dan. And yes. Yeah, and that was, I think, a lot of the actually autistic voices that were in the comments under this post said the same thing, that I feel this is offensive, condescending, patronizing, trying to make the original posters trying to make themselves feel better about themselves, and just because he's autistic, he can't be a nurse, or he needs like special praise because he's autistic and a nurse. And that, yep. So that was the voices, and reading this, a lot of people might think like, wow, they're celebrating Dan, and it's, but really, I always think like, what is the person's goal? Like what was the person's goal of writing this? Was it to make themselves look good? Like, wow, look at me. I'm friends with an autistic person. Like, that makes me so special. And that in itself is extremely condescending and disrespectful. And it's another example of a neurotypical person speaking for an autistic person instead of letting their voice be heard and them speaking for themselves. And then this whole notion of autism is your superpower. This has been something that has been debated, and it's said a lot. And it's something, and again, this is one of those things, kind of like the person first language versus identity first, that there is a disagreement. Some autistic people feel empowered by it, but some feel really patronized by it. So again, just to be aware of and to be cautious when you're reading those things. So here's another example. And this might be hard to see for the people in the back, but so there's two images, and the first one is a Christmas tree, and it's decorated with brightly colored puzzle pieces, and it says, "I love someone with autism" at the top. And then, so the poster, the original poster, whose name was Finley Taylor, who's actually autistic, she changed it, and just to kind of like point out why this is offensive, she put she covered up the puzzle pieces and she wrote, "I love someone lacking autism. I love someone lacking autism. I love someone lacking autism." And so and then her words were, "Does this second picture seem ridiculous?" And she said, "I mean, after all, why would I need to announce that I love someone in spite of their lack of autism? So why would you feel the need to announce you love someone in spite of them having autism?" And it's just something to really think about. And of course, like, I would never tell a mother how to feel about their child or a family member, and everyone's on their own journey. So they autism through an organization called Autism Speaks is actually very offensive to a lot of autistic people. And I'll get into that more later and what is actually preferred. So this is an image taken from PlaySpark, which is it's a web, playspark.com or PlaySpark therapy.com is the website. And it's a speech therapist and an OT who have started this company. And actually the OT was in one of my classes that I taught on DIR floor time. So she's doing great things down in Asheville, North Carolina. So this is just, again, the lens shift, and this is representative of what most autistic adults are feeling or disabled adults are feeling, that so to shift the way we use these phrases, instead of saying has a disability, use disabled, because again, or if you say, I think down here is that special needs, oh, they have special needs, you're kind of softening the word disability, which then is in like, you're saying in a way that the word disability is a bad word, or it's a bad thing to have a disability, which it's not. It's just part of the human experience. Some people, everyone has different, cards that they're handed. And so a lot of people feel that just say, I have a disability. I have a disability. I shouldn't be ashamed of it. It's just part of who I am. And so instead of, you hear a lot of times high functioning autism, low functioning autism, and that really does not describe what the autism experience is. So using more description of what their support needs, like, oh, this individual may need higher support needs with feeding and dressing, but they don't need any support when it comes to doing research on their passions. And I'll just, so again, the puzzle piece, which I'll get more into later, using words like they struggle with, and instead shift to benefits from, Okay. So do's and don'ts for professionals working with autistic and disabled individuals. So I'm a professional, I fall into this category, and this is something that I had to learn. And so if you have a family member who has autism or a disability, and you, or you yourself do, or you have a child, just keep these in the back of your mind, or you are a professional yourself, keep these in your mind when you are working with these people, that do prioritize the relationship and the connection. Make sure we're doing with them, not to them. Do prioritize the interests and passions of the individual. Do listen to the individual you are working with. What are their goals? What do they wish to accomplish? What's important to them? What do they want to get out of therapy? If it's a child or an individual who is not able to communicate a goal yet, always let their passions lead the way. What are they passionate about? Let's focus there. What makes them happy? What are they good at? What are their strengths? Always presume competence, and do view yourself as an equal. Don't see them as someone you need to cure or fix. Instead, think of them as someone you are serving. Don't base intervention therapy on social norms or pressures. So what should be happening? Like, what should they be doing when they're 4 years old? Because who cares? What do they want to do? Don't view them as less than or have different expectations because of their disability. And I see this so much with goals. I've had so many IEP goals come through my way. And it's, these expectations for 4-year-olds they're higher than expectations that you would have for a neurotypical 4-year-old that is in preschool or in kindergarten. And they have these like really strict goals because you're autistic, you can't step out of line, and you have to, and they're just it's holding to a different standard just because they're autistic. So I'm going to read just a portion of a poem by Julia Bascom, who is the executive director of ASAN, which I will get into what that is later. And And in the images, there's a child who is very happy to be sitting in the sand and who's flapping their hands. And then on the other side of the page is a symbol that is used in many classrooms in America, quiet hands. It's a visual that is put in a lot of kids' faces, and then the child underneath that is, I think, how that symbol probably makes a lot of children feel when they're told quiet hands. So I've been told I have a manual fixation. My hands are one of the few places on my body that I usually recognize as my own, can feel, and can occasionally control. I am fascinated by them. I could study them for hours. They're beautiful in a way that makes me understand what beautiful means. My hands know things the rest of me doesn't. They type words, sentences, stories, and worlds that I didn't know I thought. They remember passwords and sequences I don't even remember needing. They tell me what I think, what I know, what I remember. They don't even always need a keyboard for that. My hands are an automatic feedback loop, touching and feeling simultaneously. I think I understand the whole world when I rub my fingertips together. When I'm brought to a new place, my fingers tap the walls and tables and chairs and counters. They skim over the paper and make me laugh. They press against each other and remind me that I am real. They drum and produce sound to remind me of the cause and effect. My fingers map out a world and then they make it real. My hands are more me than I am, but I am to have quiet hands. So, the lens shift that's happening right now and that autistic voices are speaking out against is shifting from looking at autism and other disabilities through a medical model where you're looking at autism as a deficit or impairments and something that needs to be cured or fixed or trained out of them, into more of a social model that we look at how we can accommodate autistic people in society. So the goal is inclusion for everybody, and it does not need to be cured. Each individual has inherent worth and needs to be celebrated no matter what supports they need to be successful in our society. And DIR and DIR Floor Time are a big supporter of this. And I wanted to share a little bit about my journey. So, and just to say that when we know better, we do better. And my grad school experience, now looking back, my whole college experience has a lot of ableism deeply rooted into how professionals in my field are trained in school, special education teachers, speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists. And so I came out of grad school with really great intentions. Like I said before, all I wanted to do was help this population. I was very passionate about it because when I grew up babysitting and loving so much my cousin who is autistic, and I just saw what his speech therapist was doing with him, and I thought, I want to do that. I'd have a picture of myself and I'd hold it up and say, Lauren, I want crackers, please. And the sing-songy, with the signs, and I would force them I would not give them their cracker until they said my name, and then they regurgitated this phrase. And then I'm writing down in my log notes, solicited attention with my name, used a 4-word utterance to request. And looking back, that made me feel really good about myself as a speech therapist. And wow, I'm really helping these kids. But something didn't feel right about it. And of course, there was power struggles and tears, and these kids just wanted their crackers. And looking back on it, I'm horrified that that's what I was doing. And I want to go back and hug all those kids and apologize to them. And I wasn't helping them. Why did they have to use this phrase that I thought was important to get a cracker instead of, like it meant nothing to them. It was like a vending machine. They were cause and effect. They knew they were being trained to use this phrase so that they could get their food that they wanted to eat. And this is done in almost every special education setting, this or worse. And I look back and like I said, I cringe, but once I started learning about DIR and started on my DIR journey, it just, everything made so much more sense, and like why this never felt right to me and why I would leave these sessions feeling anxious and uncomfortable and upset, and the kids would be upset. And then I realized it doesn't matter how they're communicating. Like I'm not here to dictate how they communicate. I'm here to serve them joy and to show them that they can be safe and be connected to another human in a safe space, and that they can communicate however they want to communicate, and just to have them feel empowered to communicate in a way that makes sense in their brain, and that they can feel, develop their self-worth and their self-esteem and figure out who they are separate from their parents and from other adults. And so 2 stories that once I shifted my lens, I had a little guy that for months, he would take me down and we would go under the table in the conference room, and he would kind of run through these scripts, and I couldn't really understand them, but I was there with him, holding space, engaging with him. We were connected and sharing joy. And he started saying, "What color is it? What color is it?" And I was like, "Oh, what color is it? What color is it?" And he lit up. And we did that for a long time. And then years later, I was mentoring in his now school-age classroom where they maybe weren't as supportive. He saw me from across the room, hadn't seen me in probably 2 years, ran across the room, collapsed into my arms and said, "What color is it?" And I was like, that is so much more meaningful like that than, "Lauren, I want crackers, please." And then I had another little guy who we had a very special connection. And I think his visual system and his auditory system were just so different than, and not really supported in a loud, visually busy classroom. So he relied on his sense of smell a lot. And he would always come up to me and smell my hands and then like collapse into me. And the same thing happened. I never forced him to use words. I never, forced him to look at me or eye contact or any of those things. And I had a baby and I left, and then I came back as a mentor instead of a speech therapist. And he was in another classroom, ran over. He didn't recognize me at first. And I held out my hands and he smelled my hands and just collapsed into me like he did 2 years before that. And everyone's like, "He's never done that to anyone." And I'm like, I know, we have a connection. And that it was just those stories really, like, that's what we're here for. That's what our job should be, not to train kids to use words that don't mean anything to them. So like I said, when we know better, we do better. And then I know I'm running out of time, but I just wanted to bring to light representations in the media. Some, Rain Man, everyone knows that considered very harmful to a lot of autistic people because it kind of created the stereotype of what autism is. And autism is a spectrum, and that is not representative of the spectrum. And, but I wanted to celebrate, Pixar has some short films, Loop and Float. And if you haven't watched those, they are so touching, and they are very, very supported by the autistic community. And then I haven't seen these movies because I don't like scary movies, but A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place 2. I love John Krasinski Krasanik because of The Office, but he is the producer of these movies, and he was very adamant about casting a deaf actress to play a deaf character. And that is the representation that disabled people are wanting and autistic people are wanting. And that's why the movie Music that Sia just came out with this year was not well received by the autism community, because she did not consult with any actually autistic people. She cast only neurotypical people to play autistic people. And then and I've heard people say that would be like, and this is obviously so looked down upon, but that'd be like casting a white person to play a black person or play an Asian person in a movie. Like, that's just like, we would never do that. So why are we not representing autistic people or disabled people or deaf people, or why are they not being represented in the media? And then when Sia was presented, all the autistic voices flooded her Twitter, and she responded with, it would just be torture to cast someone with autism in a movie. And then, of course, that is a very ableist statement. And then that was met with even more pushback. So just things to be aware of. And then who to listen to. So organizations like ASAN, like I mentioned, Julia Bascom, who wrote that Quiet Hands poem, is the executive director there. And so Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, and their slogan is "Nothing about us without us." Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, A for A, so Autistics for Autistics, and then really any organization that is run by or who consult with actually autistic advocates. And so that does not include Autism Speaks, which unfortunately is the biggest name and in the right now that we see the most advertised, but they do not listen to autistic voices, and their focus is on curing autism. That's just more of that. And then this is just a nice image about the puzzle piece. And this is a cartoon drawn by an actually autistic person, Amy Young. And this is why I hate the puzzle piece as a symbol for autism. I am not missing a piece. I do not need solving. I like the infinity symbol for neurodiversity. It is inclusive and represents a broad spectrum of neurological differences. So how can we do better? Listen, listen, listen. Listen to the voices of autistic and other disabled populations. Seek out organizations and resources that are run or consult with autistic or disabled people, and then really listen. And when you feel challenged, chase that. Why? Why is that making me feel challenged? Why am I feeling defensive? Why am I bristling at that? And and then really look inside yourself, like, okay, that's where the good work is, and that's where that deep-rooted ableism that might be in everybody is, and that's where our work has to be, to try to process that and to see things and shift our lens. And then this is not inclusive at all, but just a list of all of the Facebook and Instagram pages that I follow, because social media has become a huge safe space for autistic voices. And if you want this list, I contact my dad, Rich Moglia-Cannon, or Mary Moglia-Cannon, and we will email this list to you. Also, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter are also huge platforms for autistic voices. And yes, any questions, feelings? I know I went a little long, sorry. Yeah. So the race example is just, it's kind of sorry, I have to repeat the question. The question was, when you're talking about in a movie, you wouldn't have a black person playing a white person or a white person playing a black person. So, if the race example is extreme because it's pretty obvious how offensive it would be and how it has been in history, you know, when a white person would play a black person, you know, what comes to mind is blackface and how offensive it is. Or, you know, if you had a movie, and this would never happen, but if you had a movie about slavery and you cast all white people in the movie to play the slaves and depict history that way, it would be not a representative of history. So that's what I meant by that. And it's just kind of meant to like really show like how mm-hmm. Yes. And so the show Atypical comes to mind. It's a great show. I personally love it. But when they started, I mean, the main character is autistic and he is in real life, he's not autistic. And that was a big pushback by the autism community. But the show along the way has consulted with many autistic organizations and autistic voices and advocates. And so as the seasons have gone on, they have cast more and more autistic actors in the show. So the main character is not autistic, but a lot of their crew and other cast members are. And the show just got better as it went on. It really was more representative because they consulted with the right people. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a true struggle. And if you think about, sorry. The comment was that in your family, your nephew is autistic and it makes your dad feel really uncomfortable because one of his individual differences is that he needs to feel everything. And he probably, you know, really enjoys that tactile input, but it makes your dad feel very uncomfortable because he's afraid he's going to break things in his house. And that is something that we call a goodness of fit problem or issue. And it really is just, I think everyone could use some it's just all about self-reflecting. Like, if he really is breaking things and it's a safety issue, then maybe when we go to grandpa's house, we provide other supports, things that we can touch, things that are safe to touch when we go to grandpa's. And we talk about how when we go to grandpa's, we can't touch all of his things, but here's all the things we can't touch. And then maybe grandpa has to do some self-reflecting, like what is really important, like what is actually breakable, what's a safety, or what is it just making me uncomfortable? And why is it making me uncomfortable? And I think that's the bigger picture, is that a lot of people with autism are kind of forced to mask or to pretend to be someone they're different, or trained to be someone that's not true to themselves because it makes other people uncomfortable. And really, if our goal is a more inclusive world, it's to really, for those of us who do feel uncomfortable, to really look inside ourselves and why is that making me uncomfortable? And is it really a big deal? Like, and sometimes when it comes to safety or injury or breaking things, like it could be, but sometimes it's not. So it's just all part of that self-reflection journey. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, the comment was, just so I don't forget, that she shared her son is autistic, and that the word autistic, because it is such a spectrum, it really doesn't capture what it really is, because it is such a spectrum. And I think that is why that infinity symbol is really because it really kind of shows it's a wide spectrum of different neurotypes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So her comment was, and sorry if that only celebrating what's wonderful about, oh, it's so cute, it's so great, you have autism, it's so wonderful, is taking away from the true struggles that a lot of autistic individuals do have in the world. And yeah, and I personally believe that we can celebrate their strengths, but also recognize the supports that they need to be successful. And it's the same for everybody. I mean, that's the same for every human. If we had our strengths supported, but our struggles, our strengths, individual differences is I really struggle with, motor planning. So like sequencing steps, I know I need to make dinner, and I know the kids are hungry and they need the dinner on their plate, but all the steps in between get really overwhelming and I get really anxious. So I know if I make a list of what every step I need to do and I check it off, that's supportive to me. And that's something that many people wouldn't know about me or see, and because that individual difference doesn't scream as loudly as someone else who's more neurodivergent or has needs greater supports. Were there any Zoom? Oh, sorry.
We have at the church have been working with race, and we've been working with other oppressions, and we're thinking about embracing principles that articulate that. And I found it very interesting that some of what we learned last year with the psychologist to help us through some things on race is the same thing that you're talking about here in terms of listening, being curious. There are many people of color. They're all different. They have different ways of wanting to be treated. There are many different people with disabilities, and they have people with disabilities, people with Norwegian, and they want to be treated differently, right? So it's just like I think that's the biggest takeaway for me.
And there is, if you really dive into this, the comment was that just really highlighting the parallels between this, doing this work on ableism, and then also doing, with racial issues or sexuality issues, or any work that we're doing on ourselves to try to be more inclusive and there's so many parallels with, listening and getting curious and self-reflection. And those are the big takeaways. And just like every, everyone in a group doesn't one person does, like one Black person does not represent a whole group of Black people. Like everyone is individualized, and that so that it's important for us to listen. It's the same thing with autistic people. One autistic person is not representative of every single autistic person. So the biggest takeaway, if you take anything away from this presentation, is just to listen. Listen to the voices of the people you want to learn about, and because their voices are important.
Thank you, Lord. Hence the rabbit listen. So, please join me in extinguishing the chalice. The words are in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our closing words today are from Yvonne Pierre, a sexual abuse survivor, author, and a mother of a disabled child. She says, when you focus on somebody's disability, you overlook their abilities, beauty, and uniqueness. Once you learn to accept and love them for who they are, I'll say that again. Once you learn to accept and love them for who they are, you subconsciously learn to love yourself unconditionally.